Okay, we are live. Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate our independent policy movement for progress to bring power to the people. With us today on the program, we have a special guest, Paula Jean Swearengin, running for the Senate in West Virginia. Paula, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm really glad to be able to have you on today, Paula. I know it must be, super busy during this campaign season
Mhm.
currently. Before I get into what we care about the most here on the Hill of Roses, which is how we get policy done and what we're fighting for, I wanted to have my audience get to know you a little bit better.
Mhm.
What has been your career path into coming into this point of saying, I got to be running for this West Virginia seat? I know you've run for office beforehand. What led you to say it's time for the Senate?
Well, it wasn't a political dream. I'm a poor coal miner's daughter and granddaughter, and I was born in Mullins, West Virginia. And when I was little, I lived in a really small hole in the wall called Iroquois, West Virginia. And our water essentially came out of an abandoned coal mine. Um, and a lot of my family members are coal miners. And so my dad, my stepdad, my grandpa was in the coal mines for 45 years, and he was a proud UMWA member. And I essentially drank acid mine drainage when I was a little girl. Our water was orange with a blue and purple film, and we drank it, we cooked with it, we bathed in it. And when my stepdad got laid off in the coal mines, because we're used to the boom and the bust of the market here, we moved to North Carolina for a while, and I didn't even know I wasn't a redhead till I was 12 years old because of the water.
Really?
Yeah. And so my family came back when my grandpa got sick. My mama wanted to come home and spend her retirement years here. And I came back and followed and, watched my grandpa suffocate to death. He had a good pension in retirement, but he didn't get to enjoy it. He lived on oxygen and taking breathing treatments and pretty much suffocated to death. He served in Korea. My dad served in Vietnam. My dad was a coal miner too. And when my dad died, he died at 52 years old of cancer. He was exposed to asbestos in Vietnam, and with his black lung, he died too early. And, I've buried a lot of my family members. I've buried a lot of my family members to addiction, cancer. It's a sad day, and it's a reality for a lot of West Virginians, but we do go oftentimes more to funerals than we do family reunions. And when I came back home, I seen that my state was still struggling. People in this state still beg for a clean glass of water, and nobody in America should have to beg for something so basic as a clean glass of water.
Yeah.
We've been bid against each other for basic human rights, clean water, clean air, and jobs, jobs, jobs. And we can have those if we have people servants instead of corporate servants. After I seen my neighbor's daughter get cancer, she was 7 years old. They said it was environmental, but they couldn't pinpoint the cause. Found out about mountaintop removal, which I always took for granted that our mountains would always be here. And basically what happened was mechanization took the jobs from men. And if another country come in here and blew up our mountains and poisoned our water, we'd go to war. So I got active. I done everything I could. I spoke at the United Nations. I rallied, I lobbied, I worked with every org that would hear. I spoke all over the country, took a lot of time away from my kids, just trying to fight for clean water, clean air, and economic diversity in our state. And I ran a not for office in 2018. Joe Manchin pretty much put out the battle cry if we didn't like it to primary him. And I was like, well, what the hell do I got to lose? If Donald Trump can get elected, why can't a poor coal miner's daughter? And we did really well in that race.
Yeah.
We got more votes against a sitting incumbent in 75 years and more votes than any Republican on the ballot. And I decided to run for United States Senate again because of Shelley Moore Capito. She has been in office for over 20 years and she's not done anything for us. And I think with everything that's going on with the presidential election, it really solidifies that we need a good, strong Congress. And not only that, but we need people just like us. Who better to serve us than us, right? We live in the front lines of our communities. We see it every day. West Virginians are always trying to take care of each other. We feed each other. We have people working every day trying to solve the problem with addiction, trying to create economic diversity in our state. We know what it's like to struggle. We know what our problems are. We live here day to day and live from paycheck to paycheck. And I'm a firm believer this country was built by the people, for the people, of the people, and who better to serve us than us? We need to quit putting these people on a pedestal, especially when they are not public servants. they need to be catering to us and making decisions no matter what their no matter what their political affiliation is, instead of corporations, lobbyists, and special interests. And so that's why I decided to take this path again. I would cut my leg off for my kids and my grandson, who was born in January, and I fight for every child in the state. And I think that it's time for us to grow for a change instead of us always being last.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I think that's just such a touching inspiration. I really think, especially in these very trying times of a crisis, people are very focused on, the coronavirus as this cause of death, but there are so many unnecessary deaths in our society from, opioids, from the environment, from lack of healthcare. I'm so sorry to hear some of those personal tales that you've had to go through. As you said before, having more funerals gatherings instead of family gatherings, I think is a tragedy. I wanted to hear, you came back to West Virginia with the family, and you've clearly expressed some of the issues there. What would you say are some of the untapped strengths of West Virginia in general, and generally the state's kind of like ethos? I come from New Jersey. I only have so much of a perception of West Virginia, having never visited, but I hear stuff. What's that real lived experience? What's the strength and core of West Virginia to you?
Well, I think the core of the West Virginia is the people here. Our most valuable resource is the people, and we are some of the most hospitable people in the world, and we are known to live through struggle and fight for each other. And it's past time that we have things like economic diversity. We have put our eggs in one basket for far too long. And I think the coolest lie that a politician can tell is the market for coal is going to rebound, because it's not. In the 70s, we had over 150,000 coal miners nationwide, and we have less than 50,000 nationwide now. And it's because of competing markets. And we don't have anybody that is talking about economic diversity. We don't have visionaries for our future. And the possibilities are endless for West Virginia. We could invest in renewables. If we legalize cannabis and decriminalize cannabis, we would see economic diversity within 6 to 8 months. If we grew hemp on mountaintop removal sites, hemp can create topsoil and it can clean the soil, so we can tap in on plastics. I wouldn't even think about organics, but from what I've discovered, hemp is valuable on mountaintop removal sites. We can tap into hydropower. We have some hot spots for geothermal.
Okay.
A lot of people in this state don't even have adequate sewage systems. We don't have comprehensive broadband. So if we have good roads, we have good schools, we clean up our waterways, and create an inviting place for people to come, then business will come here. Like I said, the possibilities are endless. It's just that we need people to implement those possibilities. It's not like a second priority, but we do lead in drug overdose deaths in the country. My brother was an addict, and he was in recovery, but because of the damage from drug addiction did to his heart, he actually passed away night before last. So, I mean, it hits everybody. Addiction, just like this virus, it doesn't choose who they get. Addiction doesn't discriminate. And I worked extensively in 2018, and I still talk to a lot of leaders in the front lines of our communities now. And what we have seen the most effective is long-term recovery systems. With drug replacement therapy, it plays a small role in addiction. But what we see with our incumbents is this war on drugs, and we're putting all of our money back at putting it into drug replacement therapy. And that goes right back into big pharma, as opposed to actually putting the money on a state level and federal level into systems that actually work. And it's been proven that long-term recovery systems do not have, the support, the financial support, the support of medical providers, social workers, and we should have a long-term recovery center on every corner of this state. And then, healthcare for everybody. I have been a very big advocate for Medicare for all. In a state like West Virginia, the biggest part of the population is already on Medicare or Medicaid. And under the ACA, our small businesses here already struggle. And when we talk about economic diversity, we need to also make sure that we take care of, our small businesses. And the small businesses struggle with high premiums for their employees. And if we could take that away, then they could put that money back in to, their businesses and into their employees. There's a lot of things that West Virginia needs, but with Medicare for All, not only does it make moral sense, it makes economic sense, because happier and healthier people are more productive people. We just need, like I said, no matter what your party affiliation is, we need people, especially in DC, that are going to sit down. Even if you don't agree on everything, your priority should be the people that you serve. And I think it's past time that West Virginia has a voice in Washington. And after being an activist and working with all these people in the front lines of our communities, it really solidifies that West Virginians should play a role in legislation that our senators introduce into the Senate. So it's important to me, if I do end up being a representative for our state, that I bring in leaders from our community so they can sit down and have a voice in Washington.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to be had. I think especially when you've named so many of the problems there, that just shows all the opportunity for growth. And some of those basic ones of having more jobs to be able to rebuild the infrastructure of West Virginia, having those jobs to be able to provide health care for the people of West Virginia, and the ability to just kind of not just, stop damage to the actual environment, but start to do some of those repairs with the ideas like hemp. I think there's a lot of work to be done. What do you think is, of those, would you say you prioritize most? Like, obviously, the Senate term, you're going to get a full 6-year time. But what do you think you're going to start off with in that first 100-day window where you're trying to just focus in and trying to focus on the top priorities? What do you think are the first levers we need to focus on?
Well, the first thing I do, because it's already implemented, I would co-sponsor Medicare for All. But then second to that, I would get behind the Reclaim Act, as well as introducing legislation that would give federal money to states like ours that need a hand up. I mean, let's be honest, the Industrial Revolution was built on the backs of the workers in West Virginia, their families and surrounding communities, and these companies got rich and left us breadcrumbs. So when people turn on their light switch, they turn it on with, because of the blood of Appalachians. The least we could do for states like ours is try to make sure that we do have a future. And, I want to say this too. Our campaign is 100% people funded. It's really, really important to me that we get dark money out of politics. And I want to shout out to everybody across the state and across the country, and a lot of West Virginians that just want to come back home and have donated to our campaign, especially during a pandemic. We have outraised everyone in the primary 8-1, and it really solidifies that you can have a people-funded campaign and not take that dark money and have a viable campaign strategy and have support, because we are the only campaign right now too that has a full staff. We have an incredible campaign manager, finance director, comms director, and even a couple people in field. And we've had over 800 to 1,000 people to even sign up and volunteer for this campaign. And I want to thank everybody for believing in me as a public servant and doing everything that they have for us. It's been really incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's really empowering. Honestly, it's so tough. I've ran briefly in my experience, and I know how much money is a critical factor to get everyday lived experience for these people that have had their own families going through these pains in their communities, not having a chance to fairly win because they're simply blocked out from an economic status. We don't get people like yourselves very commonly being able to rise up and organize. So I think that's tremendous, Paula, that you've been able to build that up so far. I'm curious of, you clearly have this organizing approach that's helping you in this campaign right now, but what do you think your strategy is to be able to accomplish some of this agenda if you were to be elected? Obviously, there's certainly a coalition for Medicare for All among the people, very popular proposal among the people in the party. But when it comes to the people inside the House of, House and Senate, there's a little bit more pushback, both from the Democratic leadership as well as, Republicans. What do you think is your approach to try and drive things through if you were to be elected?
Well, basic government 101, one person cannot pass legislation, and we all know that. This is a movement. Go to brandnewcongress.org. You'll see a whole slate of candidates like myself that is sincerely trying really hard to make sure that we do have a true representation in Washington. It's a slate of candidates that are ordinary people like myself, that is not taking corporate and corporate PAC dollars and are beholden to nobody but the people. And it's just like my colleague Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, it takes 100 of us to try in order for one of us to win. But also, too, we keep on pushing that needle from a local level to a federal level. Even here in our state with the West Virginia Can't Wait movement, we have over 90 some candidates that are ordinary people like myself that have sworn off corporate and corporate PAC dollars, promise not to cross a picket line, and never shy away from a debate. And we're seeing that across the country. And we just have to keep on pushing that needle, because it also, not only are we getting more true public servants elected, but we're also holding the incumbents that we have in office accountable now, because they know that we're willing to fight back and all eyes are on them.
Yeah, I think that certainly is the case, that it is going to take way more than any one race to fully get this agenda across. I'm curious to hear your opinion. You know, I would imagine you self-identify as a progressive individual. We have a progressive caucus currently in, it's mainly the House, but we do have Bernie as a Senate member within the caucus. What do you think is something that the progressive movement in general can be doing better that it's not doing right now?
Well, first of all, I kind of don't like the dividing labels, if we keep doing, because it's not about partisan politics to me. I identify progressive. To me, it means progress. But, specifically, even in states like ours, we've even had a lot of Republicans change their party affiliation and come into the fold, because at the end of the day, we can let propaganda divide us, but we all still want the basic things, and that's our basic human rights and be able to live and thrive in this country. Sure. And as far as the progressive movement goes, I think that we still look to one person to save us. But like I said, we have to remember and not get discouraged. We're going to suffer losses, but remember that we still are part of a movement, and we still have to unite our fight and stick together and continue to organize and make sure that we do get true representation from our leaders.
I certainly agree with you. You can't put all your eggs into one basket, because it makes it much easier for the outside forces that want to oppose you to just target one source compared to a movement all across the nation. It becomes a lot easier for you to have those 1 out of 100, as you quoted from AOC. The last question I wanted to ask you personally before I ask the questions from my audience is, I wanted to understand from you, obviously you're running against Shelley Moore Capito, and you don't like the job that she's doing. But in general, how do you try to assess whether someone is doing a good job or not in the Senate? What are some of the metrics that you're hoping that if you are able to win at the end of your term, these are the things that your constituents will judge you by?
Well, I think we need to vet our candidates more than we do. The first thing that we need to look at is their donors. It's like my opponent. She has raised over $2 million, and less than 2% is individual donations. One of our representatives, Ken Heckler, he was a mentor of mine. He was a congressman. He told me when he ran for office that he went to every spaghetti dinner in the state. He wore out 3 pairs of shoes, but when he sat down in his desk in Congress and put his feet up on his desk, he owed nobody but the people. So I think first and foremost, we need to look at our incumbents and candidates and see who they are making decisions for. And if if you have big pharma and industry dropping in and millions of dollars into campaigns and creating PACs for them, you can about guarantee that person is not going to be serving you. They're going to be corporate servants. And also, just seeing if these, and basically what it boils down to when they write legislation, what are they putting in that legislation? Just like we've seen with the stimulus package, it wasn't about the American people. They were trying to slide in things that were going to help corporations. And in Washington, D.C. right now with our Senate, with the states that are opening too soon like ours, well, the economy, what are people going to do? They're going to starve to death. People were dying and starving here already. They can give, trillions of dollars to Wall Street during this pandemic and to companies, but we can't make sure that people are taken care of until we figure this all out. It should be every month, everybody should have a $2,000 stimulus package, and we should be sending more relief in the states, poor states like ours that are having a hard time surviving. And, even with our governor and our senators, they have turned a blind eye. You look at how long we have suffered here. This is one of the poorest and sickest states in the nation. Shelley Moore Capito has fought against equal pay for women, or a living wage. She also wanted to turn Medicare into a voucher program and put Medicare in the hands of insurance companies instead of taking care of our elderly. And our state right now, we are one of the most vulnerable states in the country to be impacted because of this, this pandemic, because we have a large population of elderly in the state. We have a lot of people that suffer from heart disease, are dealing with the addiction epidemic. They have lung issues, diabetes, and just because of our population, they're treating us like collateral damage again and treating us like a test case. And we have one of the biggest polluting coal barons in West Virginia that has unpaid mine fines in Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. And they've not taken care of us. And we're, for decades. And we're supposed to trust these people to take care of us during a pandemic when we're going to see people die. They're opening up bars on Memorial Day instead of out, they're not out in the hills and the hollers where people don't even have access to comprehensive broadband, and sending in the National Guard where people are dealing with food deserts and making sure those people are okay. The only thing they're worried about, and they've shown it time and time again, with the children dying at an alarming rate with cancer and asthma and everything else in this state, that they are not taking care of us. And it just upsets me beyond end. And that's why I'm running for office. Because as a mother, I've had to worry if my children will get cancer every day. Now I have to worry if my grandchild will get cancer every day. When Jim Justice, he's another reason that I run for office, because he became my Democratic governor with the mountain tarp removal site 5 miles from my house. 3 miles from my house. Silica dust travels 5 miles. And so I worried if my children would get silicosis like my family did. And that's the thing. We're tired of being treated like collateral damage. We're tired of begging for jobs. And I gave a lot to the industry, but one thing I don't owe industry is my children.
I couldn't echo that further. I totally 100% agree with you. It's a travesty when you have to focus on not just your child's development, but their just general well-being. No mother should have to worry about their children getting sick and potentially having cancer because of environmental pollutions particularly, but just in general, they shouldn't have to worry about the financial ramifications of that too. I know so many people around the country are losing their, jobs currently from this crisis. And, they're all talking about just treating the coronavirus and making that free. Well, if you lost your job and your insurance, you can still get cancer during this crisis and not be able to handle it.
That's exactly right. And like I said, it really solidifies the people in the front line of our communities have been taking care, trying to solve our problems. No single mother or any mother in our state or anybody in the country should have to work 2 and 3 jobs in addition to that, spend endless hours on conference calls, be an organizer, be ankle deep testing water in a creek and acid mine drainage. When I challenge Shelley Moore Capito, anybody that's running for office, to go down to Prunner Holler, Paden City, drink the water, come back and tell me how safe they feel.
I couldn't agree with you more. It really relates to my own personal story. My mom is a local activist who works with the water supply and the overdevelopment. So you're absolutely right. Women in general are really taking this lead organizer role, just mothers in their community, and are doing the work that government is supposed to be doing and making sure that our environment is protected. It's a travesty that it's taking just these individual citizens, not these paid officials, to actually take care of us. But Paula Jean, I want to thank you for answering my questions. I want to now turn over to my audience to answer some of theirs. The first one comes from Ian Prado. He wants to know what your thoughts on nuclear energy is in general.
We don't need nuclear industry. We have plenty of alternative sources, and we've advanced with science, and we need to make sure that when we do have energy sources that people are safe.
Okay. And does that apply to both thorium as well as uranium? Obviously, the existing supply is uranium, but do you have any differing thoughts for thorium, which is a little bit safer in terms of a nuclear technology, or is it just across the board?
Across the board, I'm not for it, because, if we have to put people's lives in danger just to power America, then we have to rethink. And we don't, with everything that we have, like with geothermal, hydropower, renewables, we have alternatives, and we don't have to put people at risk just to power this country.
Okay. Next question comes from Hardy Hat. West Virginia and other coal-producing regions have a long history of being a hot spot for labor unrest. What are your thoughts on unions and right to work laws?
Oh, well, I am definitely 100% pro-union. You know what? The people died. We are in the heart of labor here in West Virginia. Like you said, the miners of Blair Mountain, Mate One, Joe Hill, Mother Jones was organized in Camp Creek. And like my grandfather was 45 years in the coal mines. And we look at the UBB disaster and them trying to bust our unions. 29 miners would still be alive if they had the right to organize and walk out of that coal mine. And I think everybody in America should have the right to collective bargain. And I am very, very pro-union. That's my heart.
Yeah, and I'm curious, a lot of this legislation happens on a state level. What do you think is something that the federal government can be doing to try and help these unions be able to form? Obviously, we're at all-time lows. What can the federal government do and step in?
Well, we need to make sure that we can put the unions, put the backs of the unions into the workers. And, on a federal level, we can fight the states on legislation like right to work. And I know that's on a state level, but in Washington, they would, I would never, ever vote for anything that would take the backs out of unions. And we do need to put legislation across the board on a federal level that makes sure that we do keep the unions into the backs of the workers.
Okay. Next question here comes from Nelson Orta. He asks, what are your thoughts on Representative Clyburn's proposal for extending the 10-20-30 rule, basically 10% of public funds going to projects for the 20% persistent poverty counties within the last 30 years?
Well, we do need to take care of people that are impoverished in the state, but we have, in the country. But, it goes broader than that. We have to make sure that people have a living wage. We have to make sure that people have access to health care. We have to make sure that people have access to college and, and educational opportunities. And I'm a proponent for a universal free college. And it's not free, I know that, but, we're one of the richest countries in the world. And if we can buy $40,000 couches, we can take care of Americans. People have access to health care and the access to grow. And, let's just bring up something too. People have asked me about UBI. I am for UBI, but I want everybody to understand is where I stand with that is I don't want to take UBI and put a Band-Aid on the other issues. Like I said, we have to make sure that people make a living wage, that they have, educational opportunities again, access to childcare and able to grow and live in this country and be stable.
Yeah, I totally think that makes sense. Anyone who says that's just a silver bullet, it's going to fix all our woes.
And it's not. $1,000 doesn't pay rent, utilities, get a homeless person off the street. A lot of people pay $1,000 already alone in health care. You look at how much people have to pay for child care. I don't want it to be used as a Band-Aid and ignore other issues.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you. I do think it's important, but it has to be part of a more collective solution. Let's go to our next question here. This is about one of your fellow competitors in the race. E Pluribus Unum asks, some people in the progressive movement are still looking favorably towards Richard Ojeda. Could you speak on some of the reasons you believe that you're a better candidate than Richard Ojeda?
Well, I won't quit, for one. And I don't, that's the thing. He's in 2014, and I just want to be transparent, and I don't want to harp on him because we are really proven that we're more viable the way we've outraised and the support that we've received. But 2014, he campaigned with the Tea Party. He was working with people that brought right to work to West Virginia. In 2016, he was very, very conservative when he ran against Nikki Jo Rahal. In 2018. He said he didn't have he had a people-funded campaign, but he outraced his opponent in dark money. And he flip-flopped on issues like Medicare for all. He was supporting, Donald Trump's 2018 EPA plan. And he has $45,000 from his presidential race. Right after he lost his 2018 election, 4 days later, he quit his Senate seat and he ran for president. And 10 days later, he quit. And he's $45,000 in debt with that. I really don't understand my opponent. He won't even debate me. And I think that's a disservice to West Virginia voters. He says that he's not going to give any attention, I guess, to anybody else in the primary is what he's afraid of. But it's more important. You shouldn't be worried about raising your opponent's profile. you should be worried about letting people hear from all sides. And if your campaign is viable, and if you do have something to offer the people of West Virginia, then you shouldn't be able to be afraid to talk about those issues with your opponent. And he's really not progressive, and I really don't know what to say. I mean, I believe in democracy, but I just really don't know what he's doing.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer and giving a little bit more clarity. Let's do 3 more questions for the audience before we wrap up today. You know, this next question comes from Hungry Country Ball. I know him as Grayson. His question is, what would you say is the biggest thing you disagree with progressives? Obviously, beforehand, you talked on some of the things they need to improve on in terms of a movement force. What do you think is something in terms of an issue that the Bernie Sanders of the world or the AOCs of the world are not properly handling in terms of a solution?
Well, the $15 hour minimum wage, I think that's something that Senator Sanders and I disagree on, because $15 an hour would be life-changing for me and the poor people in my state. But you look in California, where they lead with the homeless population, $15 an hour with the cost of living there would not mean a whole lot. And people deserve to not live from paycheck to paycheck. So when we look at raising the minimum wage, we need to make sure it's a living wage for everybody in this country.
So what would you suggest would be that rate? And what do you think that rate would do for the people of West Virginia?
I think we need to look at it on a state per state basis and sit down and talk about it. I don't have the end all be all solution, but I also know that $15 an hour is not enough for people, like I said, in states like California.
Okay. So the next question that I have here comes from Nelson again. I thought this was a good one, so I wanted to touch on this as well. He asked, how can the federal government more effectively appropriate funding for rural schools? You know, currently a lot of it's determined on the local levels, but how can the federal government start helping these impoverished areas, especially in rural communities?
Well, you know, I think a child has a right to an education no matter what their zip code is or what their economic status is. And, you know, it's very simplistic. We can put legislation through to put, you know, to look at every school in every zip code across the country and make sure that we are putting federal fundings in to help, you know, the public school systems there, and making sure that our educators are paid well. And make sure that educators also have a voice in the classroom, and they help determine what happens with, you know, because even like here, our teachers are not only teaching, but there's counselors, you know, with the addiction epidemic, they're feeding our kids. So we have to make sure that, you know, we send federal funding into states and poor communities and making sure that kids are fed, and also making sure that we increase SNAP benefits in areas like that as well. And also, like I said, putting in federal funding into the addiction epidemic and making sure that we have true systems there. So there's a whole lot, and it's really broad. And not only do our schools need to be really funded, but we need to look at the area, you know, the poverty in poor areas, and make sure that the systemic problems around these children are getting the support they need so they can learn in school.
Okay. So this last question I have turns our focus to a different federal election. You know, what are your thoughts on Joe Biden and his upcoming race against Donald Trump? Presumably, he hasn't been nominated yet, but we presume.
Well, as a woman, I'm upset because right now, with, you know, the rape allegations with him and Donald Trump, people are arguing about who's more rapey, and I can't tell people who to vote for. However, that, like I said early on, this really solidifies that we need a good, strong Congress. The Senate makes a lot of decisions, even dealing with the Supreme Court. So I don't want people to get discouraged. I hope that people look at all of our other candidates too and realize that our movement goes forward no matter what's happening with our presidential election.
I couldn't agree more with you. It is certainly troubling of who Joe Biden is, and I really do think it's hard for us to prescribe just sucking it up. He doesn't align with a lot of progressive values, and his personal conduct can be unsettling for some. But you're absolutely right. These down ballot races, who controls the House, who controls the Senate, that's where the power is wielded. Right. Because frankly, you know, if we had a majority in the Senate, we wouldn't have Donald Trump right now. He probably would have been impeached. It was a completely partisan vote. You can agree or disagree on whether it had been raised, but the Senate controls who's in power and has the ability to pass legislation. That's where the power holds. And so we're really glad to be able to speak with people like yourself, Paula, to help get some of these better voices into the House and into the Senate.
And it's up to, you know, everybody in America too. When your representative is not getting behind the things that you need, like Medicare for all, and I hope y'all don't hear another phone ring, and I'm sorry I didn't turn it down. Then, you know, organize and make your voices being heard. You make your voices heard. And if, you know, these people are not making decisions for you, keep on fighting back, because, you know, we have to hold, no matter what partisan, you know, what political affiliation somebody has, we have to hold our incumbents accountable. So we have to stay on them. And if they can't do their jobs, they need to know we're going to come after them.
Okay. Well, Paula, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to answer both my questions as well as my audience. I think you had some really great answers there in terms of, you know, the inspiration for running. I think it's so true. We have to get back to the basics of just life and health in our communities and having a system that works for us as the people. So I wanted to just give you one more moment to let the folks out there know, you know, if they liked what they heard today, how can they support your campaign?
Well, people are already voting. They opened up the absentee ballot process to everybody in the state. So, you know, I would appreciate your vote if I could get it, because I would love to be able to be a public servant and serve my state. My dream was never to go to Washington, to be honest with you. As country girl, don't want to go, but I think it's about survival for us, and I'm willing to step up and do it. You can also go to our website, and we also do have a COVID-19 relief page there, as well as and then, you know, a tab where you can figure out how to vote. If you want to vote with the absentee ballot, it's paulajean.com. That's Jean with a J. And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. It's Paula Jean 2020.
Well, Paula, thank you so much. And everyone, as you can see scrolling across the bottom of the page, that's how you get to the website at paulajean.com. Thank you so much for Paula for coming on today. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you. And I look forward to hopefully, you know, seeing you win that seat. I am inclined. I know the person asked about, you know, Richard Ojeda, but I think you're absolutely right. We do need someone who has consistency, who has that grit, and who has the organizing ability to actually get these things done. Not just having a loud mouth, but actually is working day by day to make sure it happens. So, Paula, thank you again for coming on today.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming here to listen to us. I want to let you know we have some.
Also, if anybody wants to reach me too, my telephone number is 304-894-7472. Especially if you're across the state and you don't have food right now and you don't have water, we'll try to get you connected with folks that are organizing and trying to help with relief efforts right now too.
Oh, Paul, that's so sweet of you. I love the transparency to just openly give out the number and help people in need. Thank you for doing that. I think it's really important in these times that we don't just say it's our constituents, but we're all in this together right now.
We are.
But, you know, what I was trying to get to before was, you know, I wanted to just remind folks that we have more conversations like this to come. Tomorrow, we're going to be having a conversation with the 3 challengers in the Oregon primary that's happening today, coming onto the program to react to their primary, and hopefully one of them is a winner. We'll find out today. Then we're going to be having an interview with Liam O'Mara. He's a candidate in California's 42nd district. And then we're going to have Maxwell Barrow to finish this week off from Maryland's 6th district. So we look forward to having more conversations like we had today with Paula. Paula, once again, thank you so much for being here. Rosebuds, thank you for coming here and attending this conversation and asking some really important questions today. I hope you're all staying safe out there. I hope you're all having a little bit more of this connection from being able to have this conversation with our people that are really trying to champion this change. We don't want you to feel isolated and alone and giving up hope, because I think that's been a big challenge, especially during this week. It's Mental Health Awareness Week. So we want you to know you're not alone out there and that we're here fighting for you, and we appreciate you being in this conversation. I hope you stay safe, and I hope you stay rosy out there.
Bye, everyone.